Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Earthly Headlines. Today we're going to talk about peopling of Siberia and the Native Americans, the peopling of the Americas from Siberia and the connection between the ancient Siberians and the Native Americans. Now this is a really, really dense article that I'll have a link, of course, in the description below. I'm going to do my best to try to keep everything in line and organized and easy to understand, because I had to read through this thing a couple of times to really pin down the wording and exactly what they meant by all the different back and forth migrations that happened and all the different genetic markers and how they connect to the ancient Siberians and all the different waves of the ancient Siberians and all the different lines and branches that connect to the Native Americans. So there's a lot to go through here. Luckily I have some maps to try to guide us. So right now, here's a map of what more or less what the Bering Strait looks like. As you can see, there's the strait here is a very narrow strip of water that connects the Chukchi Sea and the Bering Sea. And here you see St. Lawrence Island, and basically all of this water here was at one point a land bridge, as you may or may not know. So they found a skeleton in Siberia nearly 10,000 years old, and the DNA from it, they've found indisputable proof that there is a kinship between the current Native Americans and the ancient Siberians. This is being treated as sort of a missing link, because it has been long speculated that the Native Americans had a connection to the ancient Siberians, but there was no smoking gun genetic evidence directly linking the two. And what links them is really a long chain of migrations and relations between certain people. And it's just really convoluted, so I'm going to try to make this as easy as possible. So Dr. Willerslev, he's a geneticist from the University of Copenhagen, and he co-authored this new paper, and he's a really, really esteemed and trusted source of information when it comes to the ancient Siberians. So he says it's not a direct answer that they found, but it's the closest thing that they've ever found. So basically it's a distant ancestor, but the 10,000-year-old specimen that they found, the DNA from that, the ancient Siberian, is a distant cousin to the ancient Siberians, who of course are tied to the Native Americans now because of this 10,000-year-old Siberian. So for a long time, the people first came to the Americas at the end of the last ice age, or archaeologists and linguists anyway thought that about 14,500 years ago. That's the main theory, the main what's accepted in the historical timeline. The route, of course, was the land bridge that connected Alaska and Siberia across what is now the Bering Sea. So this is the Bering Sea here, and right here this is a different image, and this was the shoreline around 20,000 years ago. So you can see there's a lot of land at the time. And then here's another view. Here's the proposed, the possible migration route from Siberia all the way down to North America. And here's another photo, and here's one as well that shows more of the shoreline. It's a lot more clear. This is the Aleutian Islands, what's now the Aleutian Islands, which at the time would have been a peninsula almost. So yeah, just to give you that visual, just so you know what we're talking about here. So Siberia is a vast land that has been home to many cultures over thousands of years. I did a video semi-recently about these, and I also read an article today that I'll do a video on later, probably this weekend, about the Odinov culture, which again is in western Siberia, but Siberia is huge. A lot of stuff happened there. People lived there. It used to be home to a ton of megafauna. It was a very habitable place at the time of the Ice Age. And they even suspect that they domesticated dogs there. So they extracted this DNA, and they wanted to see if they really were the ancestors of the Native Americans. So early studies, and basically when they say early studies, all the studies that they've done up until very recently, it was inconclusive, so it was still up in the air. They didn't seem to have many direct genetic links to any living group of Siberians. So Willerslev suspected that the DNA of ancient Siberians might, like if they were able to sequence it, then there must be a connection. So the history of Siberia, when you talk about the ancient Siberians, you've got to address the history of Siberia, and it's really, it goes back well into the Pleistocene. So this is what they've surmised. I know I'm probably going to get some comments questioning some of this, and that's good that it's questioned, but this is what they have come up with. And by they, I mean researchers like Vladimir Petuklo, who's an archaeologist and researcher, and Willerslev that I just mentioned. This is what, after all the evidence that they've gathered, this is the narrative that they're running with. After humans evolved in Africa, they started moving to other continents about 70,000 years ago. About 45,000 years ago, humans had reached the northern edge of Siberia, where they hunted mammoths and other big game. Now, I know I've done videos about the man in Morocco who was the Homo sapiens man who was about 315,000 years old. This is just taking the humans that left Africa, allegedly, and about a few 100,000 years after the fact, that's where they're picking up in terms of the migration. So 45,000 years ago, humans had reached the northern edge of Siberia. So that's about 25,000 years before, actually more than that, like 30,000 years before the end of the last ice age started to get into motion, when the Balling Alarod period, that period of climate where everything started to gradually warm. And then so they hunted mammoths, they hunted big game. That's presumably when they started domesticating dogs to help them hunt this big game. And Petuklo, the archaeologist I mentioned earlier, he provided Willerslev with 2 human baby teeth from a site in Siberia called Yana. And so Willerslev immediately got to work to extracting DNA from the teeth, and they found out it was from 2 young boys. So the teeth themselves are 31,600 years old, making the DNA they contain the oldest human genetic material retrieved from Siberia. So right there is that door of opportunity, that window of opportunity for the researchers to see if there's more information they can extract to find out more about the ancient Siberians, because they've suspected that it must have been a people different and removed from the current Siberians, the quote modern Siberians, the more recent Siberians. So his colleagues compared the genetic variants in the Yana DNA with living and ancient people. They found that the Siberian boys belonged to a previously unknown population. So there you go. That previously unknown population might have been those ancient Siberians. The scientists call them the ancient North Siberians. Okay, so that's what they'll be now known as. The boys, 31,600 years ago, they belonged to a population that was previously unknown, called the ANSs, or the ancient North Siberians. So for the purposes of this video, that's what we're going to call them. So most of that population's ancestry can be traced back to the early migration out of Africa. So they're the direct descendants of the earlier humans who came out of Africa. The ones who left Africa and went to Europe, Asia, and then Siberia, presumably, and Australia. In particular, to people who would eventually spread into Europe, several thousand years before the Yana boys lived, so we're talking about 40,000 or so years ago, the ancient North Siberians encountered people more closely related to East Asians. So if we look at the... there's no good map here. But if you were to imagine this part of the map here, this is East Asia if you go a little bit westward here. And that would be East Asia. And presumably the northern Siberians went down and met up with these East Asians. So the people from the two populations interbred naturally, and as a result, the Yana boys inherited a mix of the two ancestries. So about 10,000 years or so before the Yana boys existed, in all this is happening in the Pleistocene, these boys came out as a mixture of the ancient North Siberians and this East Asian population. Okay. To their surprise, the geneticists could not find any living people with significant ancient North Siberian ancestry. So that's that's a conundrum. That's a puzzle. That's a mystery. They just haven't found anyone modern who has direct ties to this population, which means something may have happened to them. The first people in northeastern Siberia are people that we didn't know, and they're not Native American ancestors. So right away, that's a huge piece of the puzzle that doesn't really fit with anything yet, but it's something that we've got to keep on the back burner for now, just to keep in mind. These are some of the artifacts that were found from the Yana site. Very interesting stuff. This stuff goes back 31,600 years ago at the very least. These are obviously needles with you can thread through them, so they knew how to sew. This is very advanced stuff, guys. They've engraved things. We're dealing with a really more advanced culture than we thought. So now the natural next question is, what happened to the ancient North Siberians? So one clue emerged from a fragment of a skull that Dr. Petulko, again the guy from Russia, provided to Dr. Willerslev. These remains date back 9,800 years ago, so about 7,800 BC. They're a lot younger, but still they're found near the Yana site called Kolyma. So Willerslev's team found DNA in the Kolyma skull as well. A small fraction of that individual's ancestry came from ancient North Siberians. Okay, so a small fraction. There's this skull about almost 10,000 years old that they find in the same region that they found the boy's teeth from 31,600 years ago, and they both are connected to the ancient North Siberians, although the 10,000-year-old skull has less connection to, but still they found a small fraction of their ancestry connected to these now presumably deceased, extinct group of people. Most of it came from a new population. So Willerslev and his colleagues call them the ancient Paleo-Siberians. So this 10,000-year-old skull basically belonged to this new population that occupied the same area as the ancient North Siberians. So now we have ancient North Siberians and then the ancient Paleo-Siberians, who are now the new occupants of northern Siberia. Okay, you with me? Good, because I'm with me. The DNA of the ancient Paleo-Siberians is remarkably similar to that of Native Americans. So there you go. That is the direct connection now. So it could be assumed that the ancient Paleo-Siberians branched off and became the Native Americans here. So these people here were presumably the ancient Paleo-Siberians that became North Americans and some of the Americans in the southern continent as well. So Native Americans can trace about 2/3 of their ancestry to these previously unknown people. Okay, so 2/3 of that ancestry are related to this Kolyma skull that's 10,000 years old. So why were the ancient Paleo-Siberians unknown until now? So one reason is that they were mostly replaced by a third population of people with different East Asian ancestry. So another group of East Asians, not the ones from 40,000 years ago that combined with the ancient North Siberians and formed the two boys whose teeth that dated to 31,600 years ago. But there's a different East Asian ancestry now. So this group moved into Siberia only within the past 10,000 years or so. So they're a more recent migration of these people. And they are the progenitors of most living Siberians. Okay, so we have the ancient Paleo-Siberians and East Asian migration from 10,000 years ago. And they combine to become what are now modern Siberians. Very, very convoluted, but it's also very easy to understand now that you know what's going on. So the Kolyma skull, the individual there, lived long after the origin of the Native American branch. So again, this happened supposedly 14,500 years ago, maybe even 20,000 years ago. And then the skull is about 10,000 years old. So the Kolyma individual lived way after the Native Americans already made their move. So Willerslev estimates that the ancestors of the Native Americans and ancient Paleo-Siberians split 24,000 years ago. So that's the working date right now. That's deep into the last ice age and well before the Younger Dryas period, about 12,000 years before that. But that's not it. Okay. it gets more complicated. So shortly after the split 24,000 years ago, when the Native Americans and the ancient Paleo-Siberian split, the ancestors of the Native Americans encountered another population with genetic ties to Europe. So if we look at this map, so this, let's just assume that this is 24,000 years ago when the Native Americans split. They encounter along the way another group of people. Okay, so the ancestors of Native Americans encountered another population with genetic ties to Europe. All of Native Americans carry a mixture of genes from these two groups. Now think of this as like a filter, okay? So we have population A, the proto-Native Americans, let's say 24,000 years ago. They go through this Beringian filter, this Alaskan Beringian filter, and they come out the other end with new genetics, okay? Maybe a filter, the opposite of a filter, a mixer, okay? Let's just say that. And we know that because all the Native Americans carry this mixture. I think they're called the ancient Beringians, right? So the new study can't pinpoint exactly where the Native Americans emerged from the meeting of those two peoples. The Ice Age was at its peak 24,000 years ago, and so different populations across Siberia and surrounding regions may have retreated into refuges where wild game still survived. So that's the working theory, is that in the thick of the last Ice Age, the populations dispersed and went into these pockets of communities, and that's the extent of what they know for sure. So one such refuge on the land bridge that links Siberia and Alaska between 34,000 and 11,000 years ago. So the ancient Beringians that I mentioned earlier were one such of pockets. So the disappearance of the land bridge did not stop the movement of people between the continents. Later waves of people moved across the Bering Sea, so it started becoming popular. More and more people went across. And then Willerslev's team found evidence that a second wave of ancient Paleo-Siberians reached Alaska sometime between 9,000 and 600 years ago. So we have this initial wave, 24,000 years ago, and then about 9,000 years ago, about the time of the Younger Dryas, or like in the wake of it, we have another group of ancient Paleo-Siberians, the ancestors of the current Native Americans. They come across. And then they reunite with the Native Americans, and then there they begin to interbreed again. So some Native Americans naturally have inherited this extra ancient Paleo-Siberian ancestry. So these people, including tribes in Alaska, Canada, and the Southwest, all speak a family of languages called Nadine. So Nadine, this is where the linguistic evidence comes in. Nadine would be spoken to or spoken among the people with this extra ancient Paleo-Siberian ancestry. So who knows what this second wave of people brought with them? I'm assuming they brought language, culture, some certain values that the initial 24,000 years ago migration didn't have. So the team's analysis, also published in Nature, traces the ancestry of Nadine speakers to an enigmatic people called the Paleo-Eskimos. So these people might have been the progenitors of this new language, or the Paleo-Eskimos might have been the first population of the reunited Native Americans and ancient Paleo-Siberians. Okay, so DNA revealed that an unknown population, the Paleo-Siberians, may have been the ancestors of the Native Americans. Archaeologists have known about Paleo-Eskimos for years, thanks to their distinctive tools and artifacts. So they brought with them technology, probably religion, because they have artifacts and stuff they deemed important, and traditions. They first emerged on the Arctic fringe of Siberia and Canada about 5,000 years ago, and eventually spread all the way to Greenland. So that is probably this wave here. So through Alaska, all through Canada, and all the way to the east coast of Canada. All the way near to Greenland as well. Greenland is like up here. Is that Green? Yeah, that's Greenland. So yeah, they could have gone up there as well. Very interesting. Signs of these people vanished about 1,000 years ago, and then Willerslev sequenced the genome of a 4,000-year-old Paleo-Eskimo from Greenland. They found that he had no genetic connection to the Inuit who lived in Greenland today. So the Inuit are a completely different population from the Paleo-Eskimos. So again, the plot thickens. What was going on? Was there a genocide? Did the people just die off? Did these people migrate and integrate with the Native Americans further south? They don't know. But they did get new samples of DNA from both living people and ancient skeletons in Canada and Alaska. So that analysis indicates that after Paleo-Eskimos came to Alaska about 5,000 years ago, they split into 3 subsequent groups. So one group of these Paleo-Eskimos, okay, the Paleo-Eskimos again are the united ancient Paleo-Siberians and the first wave of Native Americans, okay, the Paleo-Eskimos, 5,000 years ago, split into 3 further groups, okay? So one group went to the Arctic coastline until they reached Greenland. Second group moved into Alaska, where they went back here. That's what they think, this back migration, right? And then the people who went back to Alaska encountered people whose ancestors had come from Siberia 10,000 years earlier. So those people could have been the migrants who just stopped, because there would have been people who stopped and people who kept going. So they reintegrated with those people. And the Nadine speakers carry this mixed ancestry today. Because remember, Nadine speakers they originate with these Paleo-Eskimos. And then the third group that branched off from the Paleo-Eskimos encountered another group of Native Americans on the coast of Alaska and interbred with them. These people are the ancestors of Inuits and Aleuts. Okay, so the modern day Inuits and Aleuts are the people who come from these Proto-Eskimos and this group of Native Americans who didn't continue the migration and just stayed on the coast of Alaska. And then some of them traveled back across the Bering Strait way back to Siberia, which would be this one, back migration of A2A. This is the genome, that's the marker that they have. And then another wave of people returned to North America about 1,000 years ago, where they spread through the Arctic and replaced the original Paleo-Eskimos of Greenland. And that would be the current Inuit people now. Okay? So the migration that brought the ancestors of living Native Americans into the Americas might not have been the first. Ancient North Siberians got to Alaska or Canada thousands of years earlier. And there you go. That's what we know now of this ongoing investigation of Native Americans, where they came from, the ancient North Siberians, and where they came from. And perhaps they have ties, because the ancient North Siberians, they lived about 40,000 plus years ago. They most likely interacted with Neanderthals and the Denisovans and whatever or whatever members of the genus Homo that were extant at the time, deep into the Pleistocene. So let me know what you guys think. This has been a really, really thorough and in-depth episode, just to make up for my lack of episodes this entire week. I've been busy. I think my next episode will be episode 150, and I thank all of you guys for the support. I hope if you watch this video to the end, thank you so much. I appreciate it. Please let me know in the comments what you think, and I'll talk to you guys later.